Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. This story is titled My Neighbor, the HOA Lunatic. I am currently experiencing my neighbor. It is bad. This is super long, so get some snacks or something. There is a lot of backstory mixed into it, and you will find I'm not a writer by trade. Also, this is the first time I am posting on Reddit, and apologies for the randomness of this post. It is hard to put it in order and keep track of so much nonsense. I have been in my home now for nearly 4 years. This is the third house I have owned, so I bring some experience. However, the previous homes had what turned out to be phenomenal neighbors now that I can shine them in the light of this one in which I am writing. Previously, we had good relationships with neighbors, enjoyed each other's company, helped with projects, and just generally looked out for each other. I expected to start my new life in my new home with the same ideas, but that just was not on the menu. Learning what I could before moving in, I did find that many of the homes have children aged similar to my own. This was a newer development, and the people that were buying have multiple kids. I myself at the time had 3 sons, and there were a ton of boys their age. I was really excited for them, really. The tone was set early on though. During the construction we often stopped by as a family to see the construction. One particular trip we pulled in and parked on the gravel that would one day be our driveway. I noticed immediately that 3 boys were walking down the sidewalk towards us. And I made sure to point that out to my boys. I told my boys, these boys walking will likely become your friends. You need to go out and introduce yourselves to them while mom and I go in to check out the house. My oldest took the lead like he often does and waited until he and his brothers were out of the van to approach them. I could hear him say hello and this is going to be our house and whatnot, but that is when I first noticed something off. Those 3 children said nothing to my boys, turned around and walked off. Once they were out of earshot, I asked my oldest, who was nearly 9 at the time, what happened. He had no idea. He said he introduced himself and his brothers, said something about the house, and then they walked away saying nothing. Really strange. Fast forward to move-in day and beyond, for more than a year my boys made no friends. Instead they were constantly rejected, targeted for ridicule, or just plain harassed. I simply could not believe it. I remember being a kid and I didn't know what the hell was wrong with them, or us, or what. Currently, that situation has slightly resolved as 2 of the neighbor kids finally came around, which also caused them to be ostracized by the remaining neighborhood kids. Very strange, but come to find out, they are just acting like their entitled parents. On to the fun. One of my neighbors, not quite next door, but properties do touch slightly in the back, was one of my first targets for friendship. His name is not Stanley, but we will call him that since he is such a tool. He is about my age, his wife is about my wife's age, and he had 4 sons, with the oldest being older than my oldest and the next few being the same ages as mine. I also found out that he is a firefighter, which I thought was cool, and that he had previously owned a landscaping business. I liked all of that because I'm not the type to pay for work and instead do it myself. We found all of this out early on during a conversation in the backyard. While conversing, I also let Stanley know that we are going to be putting in a fence, and I overviewed with him what I was planning on. I had to alter the fence path because of this particular neighbor's encroachment on my property, but it was minimal and I was not out for enemies. I also made it known how I was going to run my fence. It's really no one's business by mine and my wife's, but what do I care? Maybe this guy had some suggestions or something. Instead he said nothing more than do whatever you want, it is your land. I later approached him again and I overviewed potential plans, including where it will sit, and again nothing was said. I decided it was good to once again approach him. This time I had the plan in action and a fencing company was due to come out the next week. This time my fearless neighbor mentioned how my next door neighbor opposite of him has a 6-foot vinyl privacy fence. He also said how those are not allowed unless certain criteria are met in our CC&Rs. Curious where he was going with this, I asked him if anyone cares. His response indicated that everyone actually does care, and he then told me about how he called the management company to see how come they could have it and he couldn't, and he then expressed how he doesn't care and was just curious. I responded with a "You called on them?" and that was met again with "I just wanted to know why." I didn't quite know what to do with this information. This man just proudly told me how he tattled, and this is something that I'm not used to. I had no choice then but to put the fence install on hold and obtain an approval via the HOA's architectural request form. I played it dumb as I am new and I got it expedited to get back on track for my fence. I had also made mention to Stanley that I will get this approval. The fence install day finally comes and I have my new vinyl 4-foot privacy fence in. It looks great and I am happy until I start noticing that other neighbors are no longer being friendly towards us. Nothing really bad, just no more waving and the sort. Baffled by this, I made an effort to talk to the national hero that lives by me. I called out to him, "Stanley!" He was out in his backyard tending to something at the ground level. He heard his name and stood up, glanced over at me and then quickly squatted back down to pretend it didn't happen. I stood by for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, before saying anything again. "Stanley!" I said a bit louder. He now knew that I was not going away. Once I had his attention and he made his way over to me, I began asking a few questions. This has been a few years now, so I don't quite remember verbatim, but it was along the lines of, "Hey, I'm new around here, and I don't really know anyone still. I cannot help but notice that many people around here have started acting differently towards me. Do you have any idea what is going on, or what I may have done?" Stanley at first acted as if this was news to him and then quickly did offer an explanation to this.
"Well, I can tell you one thing. No one likes your fence."
Wait, what? I needed to know what the hell he is talking about and asked, what is wrong with my fence? Apparently he does not like how I have it ran since it does not follow my property line. The thing with this is that not only did I tell him 3 separate times about my plans, but I also could not build on my property line because his retaining wall is built around 5 feet onto my land, and on top of it, literally, his fence is built about 1 foot onto my land, tapering down to nothing at my property corner. He also has taken a concern that it is a privacy fence, which is not allowed. I read the indentures, they are written in grey. I realize now that the interpretation lies with them and not with me, but regardless I put in for an approval and got it. I did nothing deceiving and really would have put in any fence in any place because I just didn't care, but if it was up to me, I would want it to be solid just to not hear my dog barking as much at dog stuff. So I began my descent into hell. Stanley made sure to be as arrogant as possible, letting me know that I was in the wrong and everyone hates my fence, and as an extension, they hate me. It was only a matter of time before Stanley aggressively pointed at my chest, in and out of motion, declaring,
"Things are going to get a lot more strict around here."
I hate times like this because they are just so confusing. Eventually, it just becomes known that we are not liked because of a fence and that everyone agrees that we are terrible. I made the best effort I could at the time to talk to other neighbors, but at the time I was still a bit jaded, and I know that did not help my case. All in all, no one else would admit to me that they had a problem, so maybe they don't. A bit about my backyard. The backyard is quite unique for the area. I have a natural limestone/granite/chert bluff behind my house. At the closest, it is about 25 feet from the back door. The top of the wall, which is about 15 feet tall, was sloped towards the ledge and a great deal of erosion had taken place. It was at highest 20 feet higher than the ground level of my yard. The slope was covered in weeds and all sorts of unwanted plant life, think burrs, and I was now in charge of it. I had to get my lawnmower up there to cut and even flung a rock through my second floor window due to the high starting location of it. To be honest, it sucked. Cutting those weeds down while slipping on the slope that leads to a 15 feet drop off is kind of scary, and even more so when operating a push mower. My wife refused to look out the windows while I was up there cutting. I had to make a change, and I did. Last year during the summer, I began digging up there. I had first started with a plan to place lager rocks down to create a stone staircase of sorts to get up easier. Once that was done, I was curious what else could be done. I started digging more before I realized that there is a relatively flat area underneath that dangerous slope. I spent weeks out there in the sun with a shovel in hand, throwing shovelful after shovelful down to the lowest level. I eventually got an area up there large enough to prove to a bobcat operator that a substantial working surface exists under that clay-ridden slope, and he agreed to help clear it. It took about 2 hours of bobcat work to clear a large flat area that sits about 15 feet above the rest of the yard. It was awesome. Outdoors is my thing, by the way, since the uppermost layer of this stone was resembling of a frozen ocean. You just couldn't get the ins and outs clear with a bobcat. It took another week plus of me getting out there after work and working with a shovel in hand till nightfall before it was clear. Fall was now coming to a close, and I knew I needed to put a retaining wall up there. I just didn't want to back then. I was sore and tired. To get an idea on how much clay and rock was removed, it took 14 tandem dump truck loads to haul it away. This spring gets here and I drum up enough courage to go out and start working again. We purchased our retaining wall blocks and had them delivered, and now I can start. This of course stirs up the neighborhood and drama begins again. My parents had come over, checking out all the many pallets of blocks and looking at the job that I had done so far. While they were over, Stanley appeared in my backyard.
Hey, are you putting a retaining wall in up there? I figured you were, but I didn't know how you would be able to, so I called an engineering friend of mine to see how it could be done.
At first I didn't know what type of answer he was looking for, but it turns out he wanted to hear me say it was going to be pinned into the wall, which it is. He seemed satisfied by that, but I also knew he was just so curious. Curious like a cat. It was all of a day that passed before I heard knocking on my door. That was the day I got to meet the city building commissioner, Larry, altered name. He wanted to know what I was up to, since he did not see a crew and did not find any city permits. I was prepared for this and let him know that I had only planned on making 3 foot tall, so no permit was required, right? He heard that and was relieved to a sense. Maybe he thought I was going to be irate. Regardless, we got to talking and he said he was not called and just happened to see the project while driving by. Yeah, right, Larry and I actually hit it off. Being kind gets you to almost anywhere you want to be. I told Larry that I had considered making it taller, but wasn't quite sure how it would turn out. Larry said it might be in my best interest to get a permit with the city, since there already appears to be neighborhood drama. He said he has now been here and checked it out, so if he sees a permit come through, he will know about it and approve it. Sweet deal, I gotta get it now, and I did. I held off the start of my project for 2 days while I waited for my permit. I got it and began working. To understand the magnitude of this project, you must first huff a lot of air duster. It is a big project. Very few people would attempt it alone, but I am handy and persistent, plus I didn't want to pay the 40 to 50k bid that contractors were offering. Because of its size, it took me a few months to finish. Once I was nearly finished and had put the last of the 24 cubic yards of topsoil in, I was approached by Stanley.
Hey, you got a minute? I need to talk to you.
To paint the picture, I was drenched in sweat as was customary by then, and it was on the brink of raining. I approach him to see what is going on. He tells me that I never requested an approval from the HOA for this retaining wall. You know, the one I've been working on for months, the same one he came onto my property to talk about. Yeah, he waited until I was done for some reason and then told me how wrong I was. Unfortunately, Stanley was right. I did not get HOA approval, but I felt like I had a good reason for it. A year or two previous to the backyard, I had put in a retaining walled front landscaping. I called the HOA to inquire about approvals for it and was told retaining walls never need an approval. So, my bad for getting told wrong information and then remembering it, right? Another happening since the fence went in and before my digging project was that the neighborhood was now getting full enough to start enlisting board members, which Stanley set himself up for and was voted in. So there we are going back and forth, me saying I was told one was not needed and also who told me that. He persisted and I finally told him, listen, this is my yard and my wall, leave me alone and let me do what I'm doing. That was not received well and he exploded on me.
Fine, I will sue you like I'm suing the other 2 neighbors down the street. I will make you tear your damn wall down.
By then it was raining and he went in. I did not, but instead I pondered the fact of how I have now been threatened physically and legally. I don't want to deal with litigation, this is insane. I then spent the next few days talking with any neighbor that happened to be walking by to let them know about the abuse I have received by Stanley. Some of them could not believe it and said, "Really? Stanley said that stuff to you?" What is funny about all of this is that I just stood by quiet and wanting it over. That was until I met a new neighbor that moved in and I found out that Stanley has been harassing them over their fence too. This is one of the 2 neighbors that Stanley was proudly talking about suing. I have also made my way to City Hall and checked up on Stanley to make sure he had requested all the permits for his yard and work. To my utter surprise, he has never gotten a city permit. I would bet the building commissioner would like to know that. I actually owed him a call anyway, because Stanley had also mentioned prior to threatening me with a lawsuit that he called Larry the day before. Stanley then told me that Larry was surprised to hear that my wall was nearly 6 foot tall and that Larry had explicitly told me to not go higher than 3 feet. I had told Stanley that none of that was the case, but he resolved that he was told all that just the other day. I wish I could tell you something came of it, but nothing did. Larry did not even seem fazed that another person was so actively putting words into his mouth, and apparently if you can sneak a project in without permits, then that is fine. It was not long before Stanley caught wind of me talking to everyone. He did not like it. I can admit that I went too far with some of it, but nothing horrible. I had also started telling neighbors that not only does Stanley attempt to bully and intimidate me, but one of his sons had been bullying my son at school. I did not learn about that until the school called emergency meetings with my wife and me regarding my oldest son talking about ending his own life. Yeah, that kind of bullying. I should have not crossed wires and left my conversations on the current issue, but again I was angry. I said nothing false, only that he attempts to bully me and his kids have already been successful at bullying my kids. I then got a text that Stanley wanted to clear the air. I arranged to meet him in front of my house where I was set to record. Stanley and I had about a 45-minute conversation. It was during the conversation that I learned how dangerous he is, as he never says the same thing twice and it is always different. I was floored to hear him tell me about how poorly I handled our last conversation over the fence. Not only that, but he had no recollection of threatening to sue me. Stanley also made comments about what a pain it is being on the board and about how everyone is always complaining and sometimes you have to be an a-hole. I rebutted that he has only been an a-hole to me. This statement also did not go over well and caused him to fire back.
Well, maybe it is because of the way you've been treating me.
He then went on retelling the events the day he entered my property to ask about the wall. He told me about how my dad cursed him out, stating, Stanley said,
He said, "Why don't you guys just mind your own business?" I was like, whoa, me.
Are you sure that's what he said? Stanley.
He said F and crap I don't know how many times.
He further goes, these neighbors around here are nosy. He goes, it is his yard, he can do whatever the F he wants. I'm like, no, unfortunately that's not true because there's guidelines. On to nonsense, but this is verbatim as I have the recording. Here's the thing, my dad does curse and sometimes a lot. But if you know anything about old farm boys, then you know that they pay attention to the company they are with at the time. He will rarely curse in front of my mom and even less around my wife. To say that he said all that is absurd and unfounded. I started getting super compliant at this point, as this man has now presented himself as a dangerous sociopath with narcissistic tendencies, and there is only pain in pursuing any conversations with him. But of course, he is on the board and is super important. I'm not sure what I need to do now. This is a current and ongoing issue. I did submit the HOA form and he is holding onto it for some reason. The management company has clearly taken his side and will no longer call me back. I must rely on different tactics to get a response from them. What seems to work best is calling home builders and asking if they use that company. If so, is there a secret to getting a hold of them? If not, I discourage it and will tell them everything they are willing to listen to. I am now also working on a certified letter outlining his encroachment, and I am attempting to put a stop on the adverse possession clock. Update to the story. Hey Reddit, I am posting this short update now 2 years after my original post to let you know that the issue is resolved. Stanley, my psycho neighbor, visited me at night with a baseball bat around 2 months after my original post. He went absolutely mental and threatened to kill me if I don't tear down my retaining wall once and for all. Thankfully, this was all recorded on the security cameras that you guys suggested me to get. I really have to thank you guys for that brilliant idea, it might have saved my life. Long story short, I got a restraining order against Stanley, which might not have been needed in hindsight, as his family got him admitted to a mental institution not long after this happened. Apparently he was suicidal and his family was no longer willing to deal with his crazy outbursts. Ever since this happened, we now pretty much live in peace and the HOA is no longer an issue as well. Cheers. And Ripe Stars, unfortunately, this story once again shows that HOAs often attract all sorts of crazy people. In the end, I am kind of happy that Stanley probably now gets the help that he needs. But then again, I also feel bad for OP's family that they had to go through all of this. You would think that if you buy a house in what is essentially a private, secure neighborhood, that you are actually safe and secure, but sometimes, especially in HOAs, the opposite is the case. And Ripe Stars, with this we have unfortunately reached the end of today's video. However, if you cannot get enough of my stories, then I would highly suggest you to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will show up at any moment in the left corner of the screen, which includes over 1000 Ripe stories. In addition, if you would like to share one of your own stories, then please head on over to r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, where you can post your own story and there is a good chance that I might read it in a video. In addition, please also check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive Reddit videos that you won't find on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, your daily support is very much appreciated and I hope to see you again tomorrow.